Yeah. Today on the podcast,
I'll give you a jumping off point. Whoa, who did your intro?
Hey, that was Ryan and I.
Yeah.
I know that it didn't sound anything like us, but truly, thank you very much for joining us here. Ryan Penington is our guest today. As always, myself, I'm Nick Hinton, and to my left
is Ryan Selleck.
Yeah.
Two Ryans on the show. That always happens. Two Ryans.
Yeah. 2 weeks in a row, two Ryans on the show. First, it was Ryan M. Brewer, not Bruner.
Yeah. Ryan Brewer with Ryan Selleck, and now Ryan Penington with Ryan Selleck.
Excellent. Well, I see a new name for the show, like the Ryan Show. Just only Ryans, only fine Ryans.
I'm afraid you're going to have to change your name, Nick Hinton.
Well, we had a Nick
had a
can
Ryan still be on the show.
Well, we also had another Nick on the show last week too.
Oh, okay.
Maybe that's the thing. One Nick, one Ryan. I like it.
Ryan every week. Squared. One Nick and one Ryan, guaranteed.
I love it. Well, thank you both for having me on the show. I actually am really excited to be here. So let's get into it.
Let's get into it. Yeah.
Well, talking about creativity and all that stuff and
all of that stuff, that's
just where it comes from.
Yeah, we can get down in the mud there. That's for sure. We definitely enjoy going down those rabbit holes. But I mean, you were mentioning before we jumped on that you were it's been a rough year, but obviously for everybody. But like it's been a pretty good year for you as well too. Can you kind of elaborate on that?
Sure. Yeah. Just to let you know my situation, I moved back to LA in October, and basically everything shut down. Production, the whole world shut down because of the pandemic. So it could have been a bad situation, but I ended up taking that time and writing a script. So it was actually very creatively fulfilling. Nice. And then what's kind of cool on top of that, it was a musical, and then it was a post-apocalyptic musical. Cool. So I don't know, it was just an interesting time. So yeah, I didn't let the pandemic bring me down, but then it's kind of like deja vu because I originally moved to LA in 2007. And that fall, the writers went on strike. So Hollywood itself shut down before. So this is twice that it's happened to me where I moved here and a few months later, everything shut down. But I'm just super excited. It's not the same Hollywood it was in 2007. It's actually super cool. There's going to be a lot of opportunities and stuff like that. So I just kept the muscles going by writing that script. So I don't know, it was awesome. Then I got to collaborate with the artists that wrote the music. So that's kind of my language too. I like to do music projects. So it was really cool. So I'm super excited for it. And we'll see where that goes.
Well, and you said that you've moved to LA basically twice now. And just to provide a little bit of bio, moved from Indianapolis, correct?
From Indianapolis, yes.
Okay.
So I've only lived in Indy native, man, born and raised. The only other place I've been is I went to film school in Vancouver, Canada when I was 19, and that was super dope. So that was 1999. And I argue that it was the best year of cinema. Every big director that made a movie that year. I mean, you had Eyes Wide Shut, being John Malkovich, Magnolia, Fight Club, all these amazing movies. So when I was 19, I moved to Canada, kind of got my education in film. And then I even moved back to Indianapolis after that and made a film. Played music, tried everything I could, started a video production company. And this was in the early 2000s. So early days of digital video. And it was just, the internet was there, but there wasn't YouTube. High definition cameras weren't quite out yet. They were right on the cusp. What was it? The second Star Wars feature was going to be the first one on HD. So yeah, so I've ridden a lot of my creative wave out in Indianapolis, and I owe all my inspiration and the recharging to come back out here to LA to Indianapolis. Because when I moved back, 4 or 5 years ago, it kind of would have been sad. Basically, I had my wife and we were living in LA. I was working for BuzzFeed at the time, and we were just getting by. So in our heads, we thought that if we moved back to Indiana, it would alleviate at least some of the rent costs and all this stuff. So we moved back, and you could have seen that as kind of a creative slump. But instead, that's when I started doing stand-up comedy. So I moved back in January and did my first open mic at the end of the month. So creativity is my saving grace, and Indianapolis is like one of my favorite places to start stuff and be creative in. And it's always had a great vibe. I played music in the 90s, like mid to late 90s at like the Emerson Theater and Smedley's Dream. I don't know if you guys know of any of those places, but they're in Fountain Square. So I played in bands. When I was 17, I opened for the Misfits when they came to town at the Emerson.
Oh, wow.
So
Nice.
yeah, so in 97, and it wasn't Danzig singing, but it was still the Misfits. Sure. And I was in a Rockabilly band that opened for them. So yeah, Indianapolis is an amazing place to be creative.
Now, the film school in Vancouver, is that the same film school that Kevin Smith went to?
It is, and that's why I chose it.
Nice.
I was reading an American Cinematographer magazine. I was still in high school, and there was an ad for Vancouver Film School, and it flat out said, from the guys who went to Clerks, it's the filmmakers boot camp. It was like a 1-year program, but yeah, it was the exact one. I even had like a sound teacher that taught him. And it was just a great school because you really shot on film back then. So like we made student films, 2 of them, and 2 documentaries, and amazing, like just learning the process of filmmaking. Like, so It didn't really teach you to be creative. It taught you what the people on set do, and what, it was perfect. I thought it was awesome. I really wanted to get out and start making movies. So I did. And right after I graduated that summer, I made like a feature film on Super 16 film and casted all my actors out of Chicago. And I shot that there in Indianapolis over the course of 14 days, like summer of 2000. So, I always try to go after it. I always have tried to go after it. And I don't know. Indianapolis has always been where I go after it first.
Nice. No, I mean, that makes perfect sense to me, kind of having a home base of sorts, right? Like, yeah. So you can kind of zoom out to, whatever sort of satellites you need to hit to really like do the thing, but having a place that's just your kind of your nest, right? Where you can recharge, where you can like take a load off and not really think about quite as much. So you've got more available bandwidth to get creative and, explore whatever the hell's going on in your mind. 'Cause, those can be weird places sometimes.
Yeah. Oh, you need to go to the weird places. I love it. And yeah, like Indiana is a good place to go to the weirdness. It's kind of great, But yeah, because when you get to like big markets like LA or New York or, just like bigger arts markets, like it is a different feeling. It's a different feeling when everybody does what you do. And like, that's all you talk about. Like all you talk about is film or this or that. It's kind of nice and indie because people kind of do their own little things in their own little groups, and there's kind of like something for everyone. And then it's kind of fun to like cross pollinate, and like since it is kind of like a mid-level city, you can do that. And there's just like a lot of amazing stand-up comedians and filmmakers, and you guys will have to tell me how the band situation, like if there's some good bands there now. But I just always think there's always 1 or 2 just really amazing bands in Indianapolis that,
definitely.
One of my favorite bands is Shadeland. Do you guys know the band Shadeland?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So like, it was kind of interesting because before I went to film school, I actually recorded them in my basement. So on a 4-track, so this would have been in 98 or 99. So like, I was just blown away when I came back from film school and saw that they just like, this was years later that they formed Shadeland. I forget what the name of that project was, but just been a huge fan of them creatively and what they've been able to do in Indianapolis. And I think that a lot of their musical madness comes from like that they are in a place where they feel free to do what they want to do,
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. I that was actually my how I met you was just doing some weird stuff in Indianapolis through mutual friends, Dan Crawford and Noah Miles.
Yes.
Getting weird and tub talking.
Oh, yes. Well, I'm just down again for anything creative. And I loved that project that you guys were doing. And the stuff that I heard was just fantastic. So, but that's just one of those things too, where like art or creativity doesn't have to be like extremely thought out. Cause a lot of that was improv, right?
Like 100%. Yeah.
But dude, Noah, where he can go improv wise, if he was in like an LA or something like that, he could be somebody. He's super funny and super talented and has like just an instinct for comedy and voices. So yeah, like that's right up my alley. I always call like some of the filmmaking that I do, I always refer to it as punk rock filmmaking. And by that, I mean that it's like a drummer, a guitarist, and a bassist, and that's it. It's just like simple. It's just mics, lights, and like you just go. So like I thought that Tub Talks was a very fun, like renegade punk rock, recorded in a basement type podcast. So that was cool.
Yeah,
I'm a fan.
We'll see if that ever sees the light of day, but it very much still exists.
It wants to see the light of day. From what I understand, it's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, these things come out when they're supposed to. So, but it's like, I always like that. That's interesting too, where you talk about things that don't come out. It's like, I have a zillion things that have like never come out, or songs that have never come out, but I've always learned from those and like built off of it somehow. So it's just almost like those projects are just to see if you can do it,
Mm-hmm.
and then you find out you can, and you're like, yeah, it's not that good, or this or that, or it's not the right time, or it's too obscure. But like those skills will come back and build off of something that like you do want to talk about. So
yeah, and that's actually. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, you
there.
weren't coming out. No, this is a conversation. This is good.
Of course, no, and I love that you brought that up, because that harkens back to a recent episode where we had that exact conversation. Like sometimes, especially with musicians, it seems you create and create and create. And sometimes, like in Ryan's case, you get stuck with a song that you're kind of sitting on for like 11 years.
Yeah.
And it's not in the right iteration, and it just doesn't make sense. And then later on down the road, maybe it's something culturally that's happening or whatever the case may be, but boom, all of a sudden it's far more timely and appropriate. I think that was Colby Holmes. That might have been episode number 3 with good old Colby.
I know Colby.
You do know Colby. That's right. Yeah.
Shout out to Colby.
Shout out to Colby Holmes. Statusfo.co.
Statusfo.co.
Hey, real quick before we keep going, I'm getting a bit of a distorted signal in here, and I know that
40 players experiencing technical difficulties. Please stand by.
Well, I'll just talk quieter. I get a little excited sometimes. I'll get quieter.
That's okay. We'll do what we can with what we got.
And you know what? If you feel so excited that it distorts the audio, I think your excitement is more important than the perfection of our.
That's true. That's the punk rock nature of it. So yeah. So where were we? We're shouting out to Colby Holmes.
Oh yeah, Colby Holmes.
And then he can just cut right in right there.
Yeah.
Shout out Dan Crawford. Shout out Noah Miles.
Yeah.
There we go. And then we just keep going. What else would you like to talk about? What are you guys working on?
Oh, this
is our baby right now.
Oh yeah.
So just having conversations with all kinds of creatives, and it just goes all over the place. I've always loved hearing people talk about the things that they're passionate about, especially when it has like kind of a creative edge to it. So sometimes it's a business, sometimes it's a song, sometimes it's a film. I'm very much curious about the process. Oh, wait, what happened here?
40 players experiencing technical difficulties.
What's happening?
I can see you.
Can
you guys still hear me?
Yeah, no, you're good. You're good. It's just please do. Well, so the film stuff, right?
Film stuff.
Absolutely.
So tell me about Funny Fat Guy. That was a big deal for you. I heard it almost killed you.
Yeah. Well, yes, it did almost kill me, which was ironic because it was that, tone of a project. But yeah, that was like my creative baby. I'd always been interested about stand-up comedians. I always wanted to do like a story about them and what it's like when they're not on stage. So my friend Nick Snowden wrote the script. I read it. I knew I had to do it. That took about another year and a half. But it was one of those things where it was like, damn it, I moved to Hollywood to make movies. I'm going to get this made. So I raised a little bit of financing, casted an actor, and luckily the guy that I hired was an actual stand-up comedian. So he was out on tour a lot. So he was like, I can shoot for like a week here and a week here. And I was like, perfect. So basically the way I started production was I shot all the scenes that were inside the apartment first, since I own the apartment. And actually a lot of like, I would say like 25%, 30% of the script takes place there. So by the end of the week, I would have at least 30% of my movie done, and I could do it for cheap because it was in my apartment. And maybe I can raise more financing while he's off on tour. And these were like crazy ideas in my head where like I basically started the movie without a budget, but just knew that the money would come through. And that's kind of exactly what happened. So I shot a week, had 2 weeks off, but found like another $5,000, and then shot like a little bit more complicated scenes. So like stuff out in the real world. And I was able to hire like a crew and a professional sound guy at that point. And then, those were strategically planned scenes too, because by then I'd actually have 75% of the movie shot. And then the big stuff, though, was still there. There was like a house party scene and like all the comedy club scenes. So here I am in phase 3. And luckily, my screenwriter, Nick, since we already had 75% of the film shot, we were able to ask for another $10,000. And then we did like the big like scenes with extras and all of that stuff. So it's kind of an interesting way to shoot a movie. And of course we had to shoot it all out of order and like dream and hope that we had the pieces that we needed of the puzzle to put together. But that was just an amazing like feat of like scheduling, the right people getting hired for the roles. I shot it myself, so I was like the cinematographer, and just like, I don't know, man, like that movie is absolutely 100% what it's like to live in Hollywood, and kind of like my first Hollywood experience of like living in a city with a bunch of people, but you're kind of just lonely in your studio apartment, and you're kind of like hoping for your friend to introduce you to this guy, or, you know, kind of like the film Swingers. I don't know if you ever saw Swingers,
Oh, yeah.
but that film inspired Funny Fat Guy, where I was like, it's my Swingers. And then I've got a funny story about that, because even the club in it is called the Ha Ha Hole, which is a Swingers reference. And then I got to meet Jon Favreau, and my buddy was like, this guy made a movie called Funny Fat Guy, and it's the Ha Ha Hole is this club. And Jon Favreau was like, Swingers reference, dig it. So I got Favreau's approval, I guess. I don't know if that's legally binding, but it's kind of cool.
It's good enough.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I cut my teeth on like 90s independent, like do-it-yourself cinema, like the Robert Rodriguez's, and like, I don't know, and Kevin Smith, who we talked about earlier. I don't know, I just always liked that you could do it. And like, I wanted to know how as quick as possible, and then get doing it as quick as possible. So, I mean, I've been at filmmaking for professionally 21 years. And then lifespan wise, I just turned 41. For like 35 years, I've been making videos and wanting to be like a director. And like, kind of where we were talking about with Indiana recharging you, like, I think that I wouldn't still be here if I was burnt out on the system or burnt out on stuff, if I didn't go back to Indiana and recharge for like the last half decade, because now it's like I have all these skills and know-how, and like I'm coming kind of like back out for like, you know, my varsity year of, you know, trying to make it. So it's just kind of interesting where your career goes, and you think you want it to go one way, and you kind of try to like base your career off of like other directors or other filmmakers, but it's just such a tough business. And I think that you can break into it as long as you know what your artistic voice is and the movies you want to make. And I do think that like digital production is amazing, that people can make movies on their iPhone. Like, I think that that's fantastic. Like, but like, there's so many people that want to do it. And so you're like, you want to be like that top 1%. And then you spend 15 years of your career and you're not the top 1%. You're actually like maybe top 25. Like you're good, but like you're not like Quentin Tarantino or Paul Thomas Anderson. Like you wish you were. You like their movies, you can't figure out why, but you're just not there. And like I think a lot of people give up at that thing. But then I forget who said this, but like if you can be good at like 3 things and you're in the top 25% of 3 things, then you're kind of like up there with those 1%ers, at least a little bit closer. So I always knew that like with filmmaking, I needed to know how to do it myself. So I taught myself camera and failed at it when I started. I shot some horrible things, but then I also shot some really cool music videos and then some documentaries. And then believe it or not, where I learned to actually do great camera work was shooting weddings. Like I shot my friends' weddings and stuff, but like talk about an event where you have to get it right and like good practice. So I learned a lot shooting weddings, but like I became like a good camera operator, and I worked on a great documentary that went to South by Southwest 7 years ago, I think at this point, called Los Wild Ones, which is about rockabilly music. And I love music. So it was great to be a cameraman on a project about music, about music. And I got to travel the world. I got to go to Europe and, film all these great concerts and work with these great people. So, it's just interesting how your skills kind of those 3 skills, knowing music. I was talking about my skills. So I want to know how to make it. And then obviously I want to know how to come up with an idea and then get it out of my head or like, write it, like communicate it. Like, so that was very important. And I struggled with that for like a lot of years, like I'd always have these great ideas, but I couldn't get them out of my head. Or like what I identified with what it was is like, it wouldn't be perfect when I first wrote it. So I just wouldn't do it at all. So I just like put off things because I wouldn't perfect it like on the first try, So I had this big roadblock that I didn't know how to communicate my film ideas, which was just me saying that to myself. Like maybe like one person, said something bad about a script I wrote or something. But when I was like 24, I stopped writing scripts. Like I'd already written like 4 or 5, but for some reason, like one person said they didn't like my script. And I was like, oh, I guess I'm not a good writer. And like, I'd start stuff, but never finish it. But the truth is like, if you've only written 4 or 5 scripts, chances are they're not that good. Screenwriting is something you got to work at, but yeah, man, am I rambling on?
Not at all.
In a good way. No, I mean, that's how we get to the juicy morsels, man.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I'm sitting here listening to your talk, and what I'm hearing is like just a different version of one of the same recurring conversations that we've had like 9-10 fucking times now, like, I mean, in one form or another, right? Like
perfectionism is a theme.
Yeah. Perfectionism, like being a fucking killer, like letting that like run ramshot all over your creativity. Like that's, it's silly. And it is just like some nonsense that we repeat like a mantra inside of our head, like that just does nothing but seek to defeat us, and it's nonsense. Yes.
Well, absolutely. Like I was my own worst creative enemy again, like most of my 20s, and then my 30s, I got it together a little bit more, but a lot of it just has to do with, I got into stand-up comedy, and it's like this one thing where it's like you're absolutely terrified while you're driving to the gig, you're forgetting your jokes, like you're getting ready for them to call your name, like you're counting down to like, oh, I'm after so-and-so, and you're like remembering your first jokes, and it's like it goes against everything in you to go on stage. Like it's so scary. And then you're like, why do I do this? Next time I'm not signing up. And then you go up on stage, and you grab the microphone, and like you can't really see the crowd at like a dark lit comedy club, and you just need to get through like the first 30 seconds, but then you're in this weird like time warp where you don't know how long you've been up there. Sometimes you're rushing your jokes, sometimes you're going too slow, but it's just this crazy thing. And then you tell a joke and the audience laughs at you, and like the rush of adrenaline is just amazing. And then if you make them laugh once, I guarantee you step off the stage and you're like, I can't wait to come back. It's such a weird, like up and down, crazy feeling. And anyway, by doing that, like it really opened up the not take everything super seriously, creatively, like in terms of like it has to be perfect. Like obviously it has to be good, and you kind of just have to trust that you've figured out how to do it. And like I just kind of like, I think some of the best artist stuff that's just kind of been like, somehow like channeled through somebody and like, spit on it on tape. I mean, how many jam sessions have you played with someone where it's like the best you've ever sounded because you weren't like 1, 2, 3 and like count you in and playing and stuff like that. You're just free to jam. And then it's always like some weird little section, like 9 minutes in or something like that, So, but I don't know. It's like just kind of interesting to jump into things and like know you'll find your groove, and trust your intuition.
Yeah, it's a powerful thing, but again, that's kind of a recurring theme too. It's like just get over that initial fear hurdle, and on the other side of that is just like a bountiful abundance in one form or another, and maybe it's just laughs, right? But like tell me if my experience is similar to what you felt, because I've never done stand-up comedy, but I have done like some improvisational stuff on stage, and I've also hosted a handful of events, and I had a very, very similar initial experience with like overcoming the nerves, but a beer and a shot later, and I'm like, all right, well, the time has come, so I'm just going to step on the stage and roll with it, right? But getting that first laugh, like for me, the very first time it happened, it was like unexpected, right? I didn't anticipate the wave of like energy coming at me, but then once it hit me, it was like I was connected to it, but in a way that I almost felt like Mickey Mouse and Fantasia, right? Like where I was like some weird energy conductor. And the response or the intended result was laughter and feedback and participation. Is that similar to what you felt that like when you got that laugh?
Oh, absolutely. Like, and then, yeah, it's like, yeah, the first laugh is definitely a Mickey Mouse Fantasia. Like you feel like, good or bad, the audience is there and they're silent and they're listening to you, good or bad. And I've also heard that sometimes a quiet room is actually a good room, like, because they're listening to you. You don't want it to be like a murmury room. So you're fighting this silence and then that rush Fantasia wave of the laughter that rolls up. And then you kind of like, some weight gets lifted off your shoulder and then you keep going, and like you structure out your big jokes for the end and stuff like that. And it's just interesting performing stand-up comedy, because from the minute they call your name, you're on. So even before you grab the mic or whatever, that's part of your performance. So it's just this interesting bubble. And it's, because I've played music and played on stage before and been a lead singer of a band and stuff like that. But like when you're up there with no one else but yourself and kind of like your thoughts, it's only you that can fail, but then it's only you that succeeds. So it's like you get to take all the glory or all the bombing. So, but I love it. I recommend it. You should try stand-up comedy, because it's not just good for like making people laugh. It's good for confidence, and it's good for like business, because like I run like my own video production, or I ran my own video production business, and like always would open the meetings with jokes, and I'd land all those customers. And like, I don't know, there's just some sort of ease that comes to like, if you can do the scariest thing and jump off a cliff, you can go into a business meeting. Or, I don't date anymore, but, because I'm married, but like, I'm sure it would help with dating. And I've heard that about improv classes too. You said you did improv?
Not through training or as part of a team, but just through some projects that I was producing. I had I was involved in the production of 2 semi-improvised state like variety type shows. So mostly in like a hosting capacity as characters, but yeah. So never in like like no comedy sports or anything like that. But
is that something that you'd want to do, or are you kind of like,
I mean, I don't want to offend anyone because I definitely have friends who do improv. Improv is a lot of fun. And I feel like good improvisational tools are important to exercise if you're going to do anything creatively, really, but most especially if you're going to do any sort of live speaking, if you are, if you've got to give a presentation, even something in a boardroom, like having that sort of adaptability on the fly is really, really nice. But if you're asking me, like, if I were to embark on some sort of like a career path into comedy, I would much rather do stand up than purely improvised comedy.
I've heard people say that like improv comedy is fun to do, but not fun to watch. It's like everybody's having a good time except for the audience.
I like watching. I feel like people who take a super hardline approach against improv are kind of like stuck up their own butt a little bit. Like, come on, man. Like, why do you got to be so dismissive over something that obviously brings so many people so much joy?
Yeah,
Sorry.
I did. Oh, no problem. I did take one like intro to improv class here in LA at Groundlings, and Groundlings is like where Will Ferrell went, and like Paul Rubens, and my favorite was Phil Hartman. Was when I was growing up, was like one of my comedy idols, and he got started late in his career too. I don't know if you know that about him, but he didn't start really doing acting and all that stuff. He was always an artist, and I think he did like a couple album covers. Which ones they are, I can't think of it, but anyway, took a intro to improv class, and it was the same thing. It was just great tools with anything, because you just kind of like always, you go through life and you're kind of afraid that people will find you out. You're always trying to like put up this like thing, and like improv gives you more tools to like have some sort of like shield or guard when you're kind of like protecting yourself from like like, I don't know, meeting someone awkward at like a bus stop, or like, I don't know, just like weird encounters. Like I can give you an example. Like if like there would be a weirdo that would come up to me, like in LA, like, just someone who's obviously needs help. I always joke with my wife that I would out weird the weirdo just to get him to stop messing with me. So like, that was like definitely, and I got it all from improv. And like, I always find it funny too. Like if someone's like angry towards me, I kind of like join in their anger. or like, or if like someone's just ridiculously angry at like my friend, like at a concert, like I'll join his side, and it's just like, it diffuses the situation, because they're like, what are you doing? But that's happened a couple times. So
Peppering in a funny accent never hurts either.
Yeah. Well, I think in general, you could get into a deeper conversation just about like how comedy heals almost everything, like that's why like a lot of the stuff that I write is always like a little dark but funny, because I think like that thin line of laughing and crying, it's like the same like almost emotion. Like a good cathartic cry feels as good as a good cathartic laugh, and they can almost like switch back and forth. And some of like the best scenes in movies are where they kind of like do that, And I just think like comedy is just this, it's always been for me just this amazing way to like diffuse situations, or like, if you're down and out, like, oh, it couldn't get any worse, or whatever, it's like that, even just that basic, like making light of it just helps you get through life. And like, especially like this, with the pandemic and, the election this year, it's just been one of those things where you find out when you laugh at it, or you see like a Daily Show, or like, any of the commentary on it, it's good to laugh at it. That's why we need those people to like kind of help ease it, because it's not funny, but like, I don't know, it helps. Comedy helps.
Finding humor in absurdity, I think, is like the critical part of that, right? Because it isn't funny except for because it's so absurd.
Yes.
And unfortunately, some people don't laugh at that stuff, but I agree. Yeah. Maybe the average happiness level would at least be 3% higher if they could.
Yeah, for sure.
I like what you said about that line between, you know, tragedy and comedy, you know, that symbol of the two different masks. And I've felt that myself. And if you notice, when you get a good belly laugh going and you get a good cry going, it's really doing the same thing to your body. Like your torso, the way that it kind of heaves, it almost feels like it's some kind of release of energy in one side or the other.
Sure.
Like,
it's cleansing.
I have been to that maddening place where you're doing both at the same time. And if somebody were to witness that, they would think you're absolutely insane. But I think a lot of people have experienced that at some point or another when they're on that fucking, you know, when they're breaking and it just comes out as this hilarious madness.
It's you know, for me, oddly enough, it's usually like if I'm like in a really, really negative headspace for any sustained period of time, like I like feeling like I get messages in music, you know, and like the timing of something that I hear, like a song lyric, just like hits me and it breaks me down and it cuts me off of my knees, like maybe reminds me of like why I'm in the headspace I'm in the first place, which usually has something to do with my own decisions, you know, and then also like kind of builds you back up. That shit always gets me. And it's like, oh, well, now I'm weeping, but also I'm laughing at like just the timing of, you know, of the universe sometimes, you know?
Yep. Well,
why there's art and like the cavemen drew on, you know, there's just always been this like existence of art. And it's just a way to like, you feel the person who poured out their emotions for the song and you're like, oh my God, I identify with it, you know, and like same thing with movies and stuff. And that's what's magic is like, if you felt something, most likely someone else has felt that too. Right. Or if you laugh at a certain type of humor, somebody will laugh at it too. So you just kind of like, you know, trust that if you feel it, there's an audience or someone else that will feel it too. And then it's interesting when you try to like manipulate your audience though and be like, oh, I know what they'll like. You know, they liked, you know, Will Ferrell movies. They'll like this movie or whatever. That's where you make bad mistakes because you're not being kind of like your authentic self. Like, and you can pay homage to films. And I think that that's great. And obviously all the masters, you got to learn from them. But, you know, you just can't like cookie cutter fake like, oh, this is a superhero movie. So I know that they like it when the superhero flips down backwards off the building shot. So we're going to do that. Like you need superhero movies where they're kind of, you know, like, let's say like Guardians of the Galaxy or something where it's like this fresh approach, or the original Iron Man directed by Jon Favreau. It's like fresh approaches to like tried and true, you know, genre pictures. And that's why audiences like it because they're like, you know what I'd like to see? I'd like to see Batman like this, or I'd like to see, you know, the movie like this. And they take risks. So, anyway, it's just interesting.
Yeah. You kind of have to be your own audience, at least at first. You have to be that first person in line. And it's almost condescending, I think, when artists do that, when they kind of like, okay, well, I don't like this, but maybe you'll like this shit. You know? Like,
and they see it as an out. Yeah, they see it as an out when someone doesn't like it. They're like, yeah, I don't like it either. And it's like, well, why did you make it? Like, you know, it's, you know, I have a feeling that that's what kind of happened to like Guns N' Roses because like, you know, they were making just amazing music, top of the game. And then like, you know, they spent forever on this album and like they wanted it to sound a certain way. And then of course, like being in a band is super tough with like the relationships, you know, it's just like being in a relationship. But I think they started overthinking and like trying to think what their Guns N' Roses fans want to hear. And I'm sure a bunch of artists do that, filmmakers, musicians, you know, I wonder if painters do that, where if they're like, well, they want pictures of ducks, you know, I'm going to paint them ducks in a lake. And that's my best seller.
Yeah, probably.
I'm sure there's a lot of different types of creatives that kind of, I mean, not to tail straight off of that, but they kind of paint themselves in a corner in that way. You know, they start thinking too much about what does my audience want to hear? What did they expect? And like that would even bother me on like a microcosm level. Like if I'm playing in a band and I'm playing on stage and we're all in the moment and everything's great, and if I start thinking for a second about what somebody else is thinking or seeing or observing, whatever, it completely takes me out of the moment, and I lose kind of touch with everything. So then I have to actively kind of just sink back into it. But in every little way, that it's definitely a detriment to consider too heavily other perspectives on your creative work. You have to just be completely authentic of what you want to do with it. And I feel like that's when it has the most impact. But I say that, but then like 90s pop certainly proved otherwise, that they can reverse engineer these emotional type things, you know? So
that's super grimy. But I mean, I do think that there's still room, like even, okay, if we're talking about like paying tribute in some capacity, right? You can even still follow some formulas, right? If we're talking about a movie, like you can definitely still follow some formulas that are worn all the way the fuck out, right? But like just by like twisting the expectation, then, you know, and also like still being true to like whatever your nature is, like what's your intention in making that, and like somehow like showing that, you know, within the content. Like there's still even room for being heavily formulaic, I feel like. But yeah, I don't know.
Well, absolutely. Well, and if we're, you know, obviously directors of films and the writers and stuff like that put their stamp on it, but I think we're kind of talking about like putting your creative mark on like these commercial type properties. And like I really liked how, like, you know, the first X-Men was directed by Bryan Singer, who did The Usual Suspects at that point, never had done like a superhero movie, but basically he used his own personal story about being gay and identifying the X-Men as like outcasts. And like, you know, I don't know, it's kind of interesting how he reinvented the superhero genre about his own, being, homosexual, and like in a time when Hollywood like didn't like that. Like I think Ian McKellen wasn't even out at that point, but he was able to identify with Ian McKellen about, hey, it's about this. And I just think that when you add your spin, whatever it is, to anything, like even if you're doing like a cover of a song, you know, if you're playing Stairway to Heaven, you're not going to play it like everybody else plays it. You're going to put your little spin on it. And there's always your little favorite part, or, you know, Stairway to Heaven's a bad example, but, you know, Welcome to the Jungle.
Sure.
But go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, everybody's got that unique perspective, and there's always a way that you can kind of tap into that with whatever you're doing. So
boils down to authenticity.
Yeah.
Just having some level of purity in your intention, right?
Yeah.
For sure. Otherwise, you ultimately get bored. Like, you know, that's why, like, you know, if we're talking about the relationships of like bands and stuff like that, that's why, you know, they break up, is because someone's kind of bored playing, you know, Billy Corrigan's music or whatever. You know, it's like, he's writing all this. I don't even like this. And you always see them like do some sort of weird offshoot band afterwards where it's like what they want to do. But yeah, as an artist, you know, if you fake it for too long, it becomes like, if you're lucky enough to do it for a career, it just becomes a job, or it kind of gets stale and old. So yeah, you always have to like find ways to, you know, take all your skills and like always be evolving them, and, you know, always try something new. I mean, it's almost like if you've been interested in being creative like your whole life, and like you haven't done it by like 40, do it. Like it's always in you. Like, you know, anybody's creative, everybody's creative. You create moments, you create dinners, you create all sorts of stuff. It's not just art. So, and they say that like the days that you're creative, you're most happy. Like if you look back in your life, like those shows or that movie set, those were the happiest times of your life, and it was because you were being creative. Or like the best dates of your life were amazing because you made the dinner and you did this or that. It's like, it's, you know, being creative brings a lot of happiness, and like that's why they do art therapy and all that stuff. And it's definitely saved me in my life, and given me kind of just a purpose. And it basically boils down to, I like to make other people happy, and I like to make other people laugh or entertain other people. And those are like my favorite days, where like someone laughs at me or whatever, you know, and they can laugh at me. They don't even have to laugh with me. Those are my favorite days. So.
Of course. Oh yeah. What now? So what was it specifically, just on the subject of making people laugh? Like what drove you to that very first open mic? Like what was the pure motivation behind that?
Absolutely. Well, I was the class clown in 6th grade, and I've actually thought back about this because like I once did like this exercise where you're supposed to talk about your greatest strengths and why you think they're your greatest strengths. And one of my greatest strengths is that I am funny. Like I found out I was funny in elementary school. I grew up watching like stand-up comedy on Showtime and HBO, Robin Williams, Billy Crystal, all sorts of stuff, young Jim Carrey. And basically once I hit puberty, which was like in 6th grade, there was like a very hot teacher, very hot, and the hormones were going. And I found out that I was funny and she thought I was funny. And even in a parent teacher conference, she told my parents, because I was like a C student. I was never bad with my humor, but anyway, in a parent teacher conference, she told them, I know that I'm going to be flipping through the TV one night and see, in the future and see Ryan on like a talk show or whatever. And my parents told me that. And at that point, it was like immediate validation for like every decision I made creatively, where it's like, oh, if I want girls to like me, I'll be creative. So that's kind of how it started. I mean, it kind of boils down to that. Like, it's really weird, but that's where it started with like being funny, because it definitely gave you a leg up with the ladies. It was just, it was something that I always had and like a superpower I had. And I would make funny videos and, I'd copy bits that I'd seen on like Saturday Night Live or something like that. And then I was really obsessed with comedians. And like, I actually got to meet, or I guess I shouldn't say meet, but I was in the same room with Chris Farley when he came to Indianapolis. In Indianapolis in 1997, they did a Planet Hollywood opening there, and I got to work there. And not only did I get to work, but I got to work in like this VIP room. And Chris Farley was there, and a huge hero of mine. Like I basically wanted to be like Chris Farley. Huge hero of mine. He came there. This would have been July before he died in December. So he came and was blasted out of his mind. Like, just like it was so sad seeing my hero, one of my heroes in that way. And I had a little run-in with him where I was like standing at this table, making sure people didn't put drinks on this specific table. And he was taking a picture with the Colts cheerleaders, and he grabbed one of their butts. And the cheerleader was like, someone grabbed my butt. And like, he turned around to me and kind of like pushed me and was like, what'd you do that for, buddy? And like, we locked eyes. I locked eyes with Chris Farley. And that where you see your friend at a party and he's just wasted, gone.
Yeah.
And
shark-eyed.
So it's like, it was super sad and weird. And then that's kind of what led to like making Funny Fat Guy, for sure. Like, was just that fascination with like, again, that line we talk about where you're extremely funny and bring happiness to other people, but you're not kind of like able to do that for yourself. And you go off on this weird dark end of your, whatever it is, your brilliance. I don't know. 'Cause, you have to admit, like, the Chris Farley life was beautifully tragic. Like, it's like he just, it's right up to, I mean, he died the way his hero died. Like, it's interesting that he thought that that was the way he had to live out his dream. And, obviously he had issues with, self-image and people just thinking he's funny because he's fat and all this weird stuff. But anyway, that just inspired me, again, with comedy and making the world, a little softer and easier. But yeah, man, that was an interesting, and that was like 20, God, what would that be now? 24 years ago, 23 years ago? That's crazy that he died.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. He was one of my favorites at the time too. That was a hit. That was one of those like surreal moments reading that in the newspaper. But it seems like there's a lot of that, not just with comedians, but creatives in general. They always seem to have that dark side. It's almost like they're focused so heavily and committed so heavily into creating a special experience for other people that they completely leave out their own needs and necessities out of the equation. They're so hyper focused and hyper obsessed with whatever it is they're doing that they tend to slip into that really dark lifestyle. And like, oh yeah, I mean, how many there's got to be a correlation between like creativity and like suicide, for instance. You know, like it seems like that's a very, or a drug overdose. Like there's definitely seems to be a correlation there. I'd be curious to see what the statistics is like based on that compared to like other job fields and stuff. It gets heavy down there.
Oh yeah, and I mean, you know, we could definitely speculate all day long on like what motivates that, right? You know, I a lot of people love talking about how, you know, it's just that it's that like innate need for love and attention that wasn't received in early life. You know, that it's a lot of like childhood trauma related issues and people in like entertainment in general. So, I mean, you know, it makes sense. It's horrible, but it absolutely makes sense that those that garner the most attention are the ones who are, you know, ailing the most.
Yeah.
So
the most damaged and like the idea of like Doug Stanhope really struggled. I don't know what his deal with like alcohol still is nowadays, but like one of his big struggles was that alcohol made him funny. It's like, so this thing that it was part of his damage was where he was getting the most attention. So how do you turn that kind of thing off, you know?
I'm pretty sure Mitch was the same way. Yeah. Like I think he wrote a lot while super loaded. And yeah, I saw Mitch Hedberg's last performance in Indy just a couple of months before he passed away.
Oh man!
Wow.
And he was not very on it. Like it was a big show too. It was like Dave Attell and Lewis Black and it was a great show, and he was just real low energy, like more so than what you would expect and ultimately want, right? Like not a high energy guy, but yeah, no, he was super slow-mo. Not a good time.
Oh man.
Those tickets were pricey too.
Well, they always say it's like you can't give yourself your own advice. So it's like, you know, these people that are, you know, entertaining people, and even people that aren't entertainers, you always find that there's some people that just give good advice and listen and are there, but they themselves have these weird demons that you don't know about because you're like, oh, they're so good at giving advice, they're all right. And just because you're good at giving advice doesn't mean that you're not, you know, wrestling with your own demons and stuff like that. So, and like a lot of those people are just super empathetic, like artists in general, just like have a weird connection to their emotions, like their dark side, their happy side, everything. And I think, you know, that's again, like their superpower is that you're able to do that. But then it's also your just greatest weakness because you're just like this exposed nerve. And, you know, it's kind of like in all those situations of celebrity deaths or suicides or, you know, like I've had friends that have, you know, committed suicide or died because they didn't take care of themselves. And it's just like, you know, it's like those were the funniest guys in the group, guys or girls, or, you know, those were the ones that were always there and nice to you and listening to you. And you're like, oh, I didn't have any idea, you know, that, you know, they were so in the dark place. And that's why it's like suicide and being an artist. Like I said, I think it's because you're in the hot tub that is your emotions, and, you know, one bubble the wrong way and you just go under, you know? So, but, yeah, I don't know, man. Like, I go back and watch old Chris Farley videos and stuff like that. And it was just like, they still make me laugh. His funniest stuff is when he's on like late night shows. I don't know if you've ever seen those, but he's on like Conan O'Brien, or like, he just attacks the stage, you know, like, and welcome Chris Farley. He's immediately on, he's doing cartwheels. And that's my favorite type of humor, is just like getting everybody riled up. And, you know, it's just, I loved his energy. And I love, you know, a lot of the comedians from the 90s, and obviously there's some good ones from the 2000s. And I love Dave Chappelle. And, you know, comedians have always been in interesting chapters of my life, and it's always been my go-to form of entertainment.
Yeah.
So just a lifelong fan then, and decided to pull the trigger. Okay.
Yeah. And then I decided, because I had made the film Funny Fat Guy about comedians before. and finish that up. But yeah, I got the bug and I had to do it. Oh, and I forgot to tell you, I also did stand-up comedy in the 4th grade talent show. So this would have been my debut as a stand-up comic was in 1989 in the 4th grade talent show. And that, so I've always wanted to do it. And
doing Carlin's 7 dirty words.
Yeah, I that would be fantastic. No, they wouldn't let me. I forget. I stole someone's bit. I forget what comedian it was, but I just stole jokes. But it was good. It was fun.
It's about all you can expect. It's hard to criticize a 4th grader for.
Oh, they did.
Material.
They threw stuff at me.
Oh, was that bad?
No, it wasn't that bad.
Oh, okay. I was about to say, you got me.
So are you? I know California is like pretty much all the way shut down as far as comedy goes, right?
Yes. And it was so funny because I honestly met up with a comedian here and got like a website and information on all the open mic nights right before the pandemic. So I was planning on getting back up to perform. But then it was fun because we were locked down, I ended up starting some weird little update where it was called Bunker News. And it was basically footage of me running down to this bunker and giving ridiculous updates. And I did about 12 of them. And
I saw some of those. Those are cool.
Yeah. That was instead of doing comedy, I worked the muscle of being in front of the camera, which I don't really desire to do. But again, it adds this armor to you where if you prove that you don't take yourself too seriously, you can almost get away with anything. So
Sure.
So that was fun. But once clubs open back up, we'll have to see. But I definitely will hit open mics for the rest of my life, for sure.
Cool. Nice. Okay. So are you pretty consistently writing new material then?
Let's see. Well, not currently, obviously, because of the pandemic, but yeah, I'm always thinking about what my next jokes will be, because I am a father of 2, but I don't want to be like the father of 2 type jokes. Sure. And I want to find my voice, but yeah, I write some jokes here and there, and I have a little notebook, and anytime, I kind of go through spurts where I write down ideas and then kind of develop them. And but yeah, still writing. And then I just wrote a feature screenplay, which was super awesome. That was during the pandemic and kept me busy for a good 13 weeks. But I wrote a action adventure apocalyptic musical, and that was super fun and just an amazing thing because, like I said, at 23 or 24, I was told I was a bad writer, and I got out of my own way and just sat in front of the computer and finished this thing. And I was like, I know what my story is. I wrote out the synopsis. I knew point A to point B, and I just basically I stayed on it and I wrote, and I took away any excuses or any old voices saying I can't write away because it's not true. I can write. Maybe the ideas that I came up with 17 years ago weren't as good as the ones now, but that was just awesome. And to me, the victory was finishing the script. And I remember texting my friends. I was like, I finished the first script I've ever, since the last 16 years. And, I don't know. It was just a nice victory. And I think I think if the pandemic hadn't happened, I wouldn't have found that time to sit down and write. I would have come up with excuses. But the fact that I had, a lot of time, there was no excuse left. And that was super awesome.
Yeah. It's a shitty catalyst, but a catalyst nonetheless. Now, do you have a title yet?
I do, but I can't reveal it quite yet because it keeps changing. Sure. But I can tell you that we are going to try to make it. We've decided that it's animated, so we're going to partner with an animated company, and we've already written 6 of the songs out of there'll probably be 10. And I don't know. I'm going to try to get it sold. I'm going to try to make it. And it's interesting. I met these guys that were film composers, and they did Netflix style or Netflix caliber content, Disney and all that stuff. And they basically wanted to get into the film business, and they hired me and my friend to write another movie. And we did that pretty well. And we just wrote the treatment for that. So like a 10-page synopsis of the story. And then I was sitting with this producer and he was like, well, do you have any ideas for musicals? And I was like, well, I love musicals. I was like, I don't have any ideas yet, but I have this like old idea for a TV series where it's about the end of the world. And it's basically follows this character who's super cheap and buys like the absolute cheapest bomb shelter he can find at like Costco. And then for some strange reason, he survives. Like he's the one, like all the people with fancy bomb shelters like die. And like I made this producer laugh with that one idea. And again, this was an idea that was old. Like it was probably like 5 or 6 years old. But he was like, well, can you write a song about this and that? And so it just kind of set me off on this path to write this idea, which changed a lot, but it was, that was definitely the seed of the idea. And yeah, man, it's been a lot of fun. It's definitely been the most creatively fulfilling script I've written so far. So we'll see what happens with that.
I'm beyond excited for that.
That sounds awesome.
Oh yeah, gonna be a lot of fun. I'm musical is like a medium that I've always been pretty averse to. And then stuff like Cannibal the Musical and Repo the Genetic Opera, like those come along and totally shift my perspective on that. So I come to this project whenever it's manifested into existence with a fully open heart.
That's awesome. Like I love musicals. Like I grew up, I was born in 79. So some of my first memories are like in the mid 80s. And, I always liked, like the movie Annie and what other Little Shop of Horrors.
Oh, yeah.
I loved Little Shop of Horrors. And I loved Cry Baby by John Waters.
Sure.
And I loved these, again, interesting takes on the genre of musicals. And I never thought that I would write one, but it was awesome that it happened because, again, I kind of had a music background, and it was actually kind of cool because you can have your characters like sing exactly what they're feeling. Like, so if they're in love with each other, they just sing with about how they're in love with each other. It's great. It
makes the narrative a lot easier, huh?
Yeah, it does. And it totally does. So it was kind of really cool to do. So I don't know if I'll ever write another musical, but I definitely think that you'll see a lot more musicals in the next couple of years. I mean, Spielberg did West Side Story. It's not out yet, but there's like that one, and you'll see a lot of musicals out because people like them. People like Hamilton and all that stuff. It's really creative.
Now, if this gets purchased, but say Netflix or FX or whomever is like, well, we want this, but we want it to be a 3-season series, 3 seasons plus. How many episodes can you go before you run out of songs, or like the musical post-apocalypse world, just like that premise gets way like how long before you're beating your head against a wall?
Never, because you get to go into flashbacks of what life was like before the apocalypse. And that's a lot of mechanisms available. Well, yeah, it's and then there's always, each season has like, I've already thought this out, but each season has like a different kind of like science theme. So like the first season would be about, it's like this apocalyptic thing. But then I want to do like the second season where it's about like multiverse theory. And like there's these different universes. Like what if the asteroid didn't hit this other planet, and like they're able to peer into that multiverse. And so like I've got a lot of like weird worlds that you could jump into with this idea. So yeah, I don't know. That would be one. I just need to get it sold. Sure. Period. But like a TV series would be awesome. And I heard actually I read an article about how there's going to be a lot more animated movies, kind of in the vein of like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, or like, all these kind of like adult cartoons, like not like nudie cartoons, but adult cartoons for but I think that you'll see a lot of really cool animated projects just because of the pandemic, go into production, and I think audiences genuinely like it. And like people, there's always been kind of like that subgenre that like Japanimation or like these kind of like artistic, like outside the mainstream, like cartoons. And I just think that that's growing with the advent of streaming services and all that stuff. So, but I'd always been like, just a simple peanut butter and jelly Simpsons fan. Like I love Simpsons, and all that stuff. So I don't know. Animation's the ultimate playground because you can kind of do whatever you want. You can have talking dogs and, all that stuff. And I think that the big thing with animation and pushing boundaries is like you could definitely push the boundaries so far. And we kind of live in that PC culture right now where, you got to be super careful with like, being PC, at least if you're making, I don't know, like the producers where they made the Springtime for Hitler musical. It's right. And I think that movie was made like 10 years after the end of World War II or something. It was like the first of its kind to make a joke about World War II and Hitler. And it was fantastic. And it's like, I wonder if we'll ever get there, not just with animation, but other movies where you're kind of able to make jokes about just really horrific things to kind of like heal somehow from them. So, because there was that film last year that was interesting called Jojo Rabbit. I don't know if you saw that, but like Hitler was a character, and it was about like a little boy's Boy Scout, I don't know, camp. And it was interesting. Like I loved how they used the imagery of that to make a comedy. Yeah, man, like it's interesting where you can and can't go these days, PC wise.
Sure. Well, I mean, luckily though, there are currently, at least, it seems like there are a lot more places, platforms, networks, whatever, that are supporting some of that like edgier or more obscure or absurdist type content. Like I see a lot of stuff that Hulu seems to be promoting. FX has their like FXX thing. Even Amazon Prime has some content that it seems like they have paid for in some capacity that's just just weird. So I think that there's probably a lot more latitude for like pushing the envelope in certain directions, right? Like, obviously there's probably like an upper threshold to like the bounds of what can be in poor taste and still considered acceptable, right? But like,
yeah, well, it can all be made.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, it can all get made, but it's like, will an audience find it like funny or disrespectful? And obviously, like some people just have ridiculously absurd senses of humor and can like tolerate but the mainstream audience can't. But I think you'll always juggle with what's right and what's wrong. And I sometimes think the most outrageous, funniest stuff is one, it's like true. Like, if like you're making a joke about the police or something where if it's just outright true, it's funny. And like whether, so I don't know, man. I just always think that artists are the ones that push the boundaries and get the conversation started. And they need to continue to do that, and more so than ever. And then it's interesting that there's all different kinds of platforms and screens and different ways to get your stories out there or your ideas out there. And I think it's awesome. And I think people just need to continue to do that and find their voice, whether it be like doing podcasts or writing scripts or doing an open mic night, or then just stuff as simple as like, journaling or something. Like you'll just find so much peace creating.
It's a good thing.
It is.
Yeah.
I completely agree with the sentiment that it is, a little nerve-wracking nowadays, because if you say the wrong thing, it almost doesn't matter what your intentions are. The words that came out of your mouth, those are going to be your guillotine, that's
and you can't go back more than ever. Like once that information's out there and released to the world that you said this or that. I mean, that even happened to like Tracy Morgan. Like he said something that was taken out of context, but he had to like apologize for it. But I forget what it was, but it was
I think he said that he would stab his son if he were gay.
Son if he was Yeah, okay, yeah, that's right. And it's like that kind
I
of
would
like
stab that
spread so
motherfucker.
yeah.
See, like I can't even make a Tracy Morgan impression, right? Like
Yeah, that was just wrong.
that
You're going to get us
that
canceled
pushes a
now.
boundary.
How can you know the context of the joke in written form? But like, and then media is just super quick, you know? So it's like, and studios are afraid to take on projects now because they basically know like 2 months before it's released if it's going to be a hit or not, just by like internet chatter, how many times the trailer's been viewed, who's talking about this or that. And they know the bad stuff too. They see it all, like the, oh, this is going to stink, or Robert Pattinson won't be this or that. I don't know. Like they know all that stuff. And they're just kind of afraid to take a risk and look bad. Like Rotten Tomatoes, you know, is such a big thing. They have so much influence now on like if people go see movies and stuff like that, they're worried about the Rotten Tomatoes score. You know, it's like, and then like we were talking about earlier, it's kind of getting in their way, and it's kind of why they can't compete with like these streaming services that are producing their own content, because you know, they just can't compete with like that the artists want to go someplace and make a TV show or a movie that they can have full control over. And like these streaming services are giving the control back to the artists, and it's paying off. Like, you know, like if you got like Martin Scorsese now doing a film, a Netflix produced film, that's like a pretty big statement. And then what was interesting about that was he had been trying to get that movie made at several studios, but it was too expensive and too long. No one would go see like a 4.5 hour movie in the theater, but like it was perfect for Netflix. Like it was almost like it was a project made for like a Netflix, and it found its home on that screen. And I think they played it in theaters and stuff like that too. But it's just interesting where, as an artist, you got to know where you, not only what you want to say, but like what level screen or what, you know, level you want to like play it at. Like sometimes people shoot for the gold and want like this movie and this theatrical release, and you know, they want like the glory of all like a film festival circuit with like a feature film, but their feature might have been a better TV series, and like, you know, maybe they needed, you know, more time to like flesh it out or something like that. So you got to know, you know, you can't make your project what it's not. So if it can either be a short film, a feature, or like a TV series pretty much. And like sometimes people forget what realm they're working in. Like sometimes TV series I find are trying to be too much like movies, and they forget that like want to just watch like a half hour of like this and this, or like, I don't know. So it can be bad both ways, but if you just know what screen you're making your project for, it helps. And there's just so many opportunities to get stories out there, you know.
Know your screen.
That's right.
Know your screen.
Know your
Yeah.
your scope. You know, like
Yeah.
what you can realistically achieve. And that just got my wheels turning. That's an issue that I've had in the past, is just by shooting for the moon and then coming up short and, you know, thinking I suck, you know. But like if I just set my sights to something more reasonable, to more manageable, then I can achieve that in a much more fulfilling way. But yeah, know your screen.
Yeah. And I mean, like, obviously always shoot for the stars, but like, if you're making like, since we're talking a lot about filmmaking here, it's like, if you're making an independent movie, don't try to make it look like Transformers. You know, have you seen those like Transformer B movie ripoffs? They can't do it because they don't have the money. And it's like, you know, if you're making an independent movie, like celebrate that it's independent. And like, that's with like Funny Fat Guy. It was definitely independent, low budget. And you can tell, but it also gives it its charm, because I wasn't trying to be like a David Fincher film or like these big budget movies. I was trying to be, you know, like a Steven Soderbergh film where it's like, you know, camera, actor, and director. And like, that's kind of just it. So, and I think by being authentic to that movie and knowing that I was making a low budget movie, and not trying to hide, you know, like hoping that I could like do some magic trick where it looked like $1 million blockbuster. Like, you know, a lot of people like just really focus on like making movies in the wrong way, to where they're trying to impress somebody at like this weird higher level. And if they just like a movie like Clerks, or let me think of some other good low budget movies like Clerks or El Mariachi, like they did the most with their budget, and the creative part came with the limitations that they had. Like they were limited on one location, so they just shot one location, and like that's what made it better. So know your screen, and like, and just know that people will find you out if that you're not $1 million budget. Like, don't tell somebody that your movie's, you made it for $1 million and you only spent 2,000. They'll know. But if you're like, yeah, I spent two grand on this and made like a really nice short film, and like it just, does everything and lands, like that's awesome. So you kind of like pick a project, your screen's going to be in the short film genre, and you go from there.
I feel like Bobcat's done a good job of that with a lot of his films. Like he has his like, he's like B plus, right? Like I definitely think that his stuff's a lot better than like your average like B grade movie, but who he is and what he makes is exactly perfect for like the level of like prominence his stuff has. I've always
Absolutely, and
appreciated everything he's made.
Oh, me too. I really liked. It was such a controversial movie, but like God Bless America was like.
Yeah.
And then I'd seen was it World's Worst Dad? What was
World's
that one
Greatest
called?
Dad. Yeah.
World's Greatest,
That one I'd seen that, and I'm trying to think. I've seen something else of him, but anyway, I like his style. But like a movie like God Bless America would never be in the theaters, but it found its home on Netflix and like and maybe some other streaming services. But and then he knew the movie he was making, and like he cast one of the Murray brothers in it, but it was perfect casting. Like, and then I think even Josh Gad is in that. I'll have to go back and watch, but like he casted good actors for those roles and told this really interesting story. And he knows his screen, he knows his audience, and he's not trying to make a movie that's like, a Judd Apatow movie or something. He's making his voice, and that's why he'll continue to succeed. Like he'll probably make movies. He can always probably find financing.
I definitely, if you, Ryan, or you, dear listener or viewer, as it were, if you've not seen it, definitely Sleeping Dogs Lie is a great one. I won't give any spoilers, but boy, oh boy, it's shocking that one's not more controversial. And of course, the classic Shakes the Clown. That one's.
I saw that one.
That one's an old standby, but yeah, Bobcat, excellent filmmaker. Like really, really aggressively irritating stage presence as a like comedian back in the like late '80s, early '90s, but his part worked out fine in Police Academy.
One of the examples that comes to mind for me is Reservoir Dogs, and I don't know what the budget was on that film, but like how Quentin Tarantino was able to get over not having a special effects budget, especially with that scene where the ear comes off. Like that was just like you said, that was just like a creative solution within the confines of your medium. So he's not going to get crazy with the special effects. Instead, he doesn't show it at all, and it's kind of worse because then it's like really in your head, and your imagination's way worse than what can actually be on the screen. So that's when it's like really effective. So
yeah, leave it up to the actors who are reacting to what they are doing. I like that.
Yeah,
it's ninja.
Yeah, your imagination fills in something way worse, and I mean that's definitely a go-to for like horror films, and the way that Spielberg learned suspense on Jaws, is that the shark didn't work. We all know that story, but it did make Jaws more scary when you didn't see him, and like you just saw his like POV. And again, that was like a thing where it was considered a disaster on set. Like the buzz around Hollywood was that Spielberg wasn't going to make another movie after Jaws because it was over budget and the shark wasn't working, and it ended up being the greatest thing for the movie was that he had to somehow make it work and somehow make a shark where there wasn't a shark. And I think that like in terms of independent nitty gritty punk rock filmmaking, celebrate absolute everything that's low budget about your movie. In fact, like go into a room and like turn off all the lights. If you don't have lights, just turn them all off and make it like light through the window, and like, just really like find a way to tell your story and don't really have like an excuse. And then you pick stories that actually work in that vein. And, it's again, just know know your voice, like, and you can't know your voice until after you've made a couple movies. You think you know your voice because you like certain directors or this or that, and you're kind of going for, I'm a cross between Paul Thomas Anderson and Judd Apatow or something. You try to always like put yourself in there, but you're not really that unless you actually show me that you're that by making a film. And I think there's a great example where they said, at least with filmmaking, it's like one of those careers where you can actually fail upward. So like you can kind of fail, but learn from it and then keep moving up. So failure is sometimes a really good motivator in filmmaking. And then other times it just ends people's careers, So
Yeah.
Do you guys ever make films? You guys do any films or videos?
I've done some filmmaking in college primarily. I made a few short films, and so I understand the process. I understand the different roles. I've done it enough to know that like it's real bad for my health to do film. It's for some reason, and this just may be my personal process, but like every single film that I've been involved with, it's just like right there towards the end, it's a complete shit show. And you don't sleep. I don't know. It was there. In my personal way that I approach creativity, I don't see like a healthy way that I can participate in that, but I have a big appreciation for it for sure. Is that just me, or are films just deadly for the people that work on them?
They're absolutely deadly. But my friend who wrote Funny Fat Guy and longtime collaborator, his name is Nick Snowden. He has like these great metaphors for at least Los Angeles, where it's like it's Vietnam. And, it has all these Vietnam metaphors, like we're going out like on a mission. So like each time you're making a movie, it's like, all right, boys, our mission is we're going to go over there, right? We're going to set up these cameras, right? And like you're basically fighting these missions. And then some of your friends like don't die, but like they give up, or they flip out on set, or this problem happens. And filmmaking is like going to war. And then it's also a good like sports metaphor type thing too, where you're like, a football team, and there's the quarterback and this, and you all, the tight end and the center, and you all have your jobs. And then you kind of like approach it like a sports team. And I guess that's kind of how I see it, is more like a sports metaphor. But yeah, man, like if you're really in it, the production can be brutal. Post-production can be brutal. Like when you're actually editing your movie, most of the time your first cut, like your first edit of the whole film, is like actually awful. And then you have this like sense of like, I've wasted everybody's time, but like you're not seeing it with the music in there yet, or the sound effects. And you can go back and you can kind of like whittle away and just keep making it better. But like everybody's first cut of their movie, I don't want to say everybody, but most of the time it's not going to be the finished project or product, And that kind of goes back to the thing where if like you're a perfectionist and you always strive for perfection, why would you even make a movie? Because it's not going to be perfect. You don't have a budget, and but see, you got to get over that hurdle. And I'm one of those editors where if something's not working, I can see it, but I can't see that it's not working until it's cut and there's something there. So it's just this really big like process of like just getting it down there and whittling it down and not giving up on any scenes until you like absolutely have to. Like if a scene's not working, you either got to reshoot or cut it. But there's always hope. And editing can be brutal. And then it's interesting too, because like when you do a movie, and especially one where you're kind of like so creatively tied to it, where if like you're the writer and director and editor, once you finish it, you almost have this like postpartum depression where it's like your baby and you gave birth to this thing, but then like everybody else is like, oh, look at that, that's great. And like the actor's like, I'm in this, and like everybody's kind of like take it, and you're like, hey, but I made that baby. And like you kind of have this weird thing where you don't want the world to see it because it's so precious, and then you got to get over that hurdle of like showing it. And it's and then that's what's tragic about movie making, is that you can't it's so time consuming. And like if you're spending 6 months making a movie or a year making a movie and you make a bad one, it's like you're like, oh, that was just such a waste of time. And why would you in your right mind go back and make another movie? And like, you got to get over that hurdle. And it's just, it's a tricky thing. Like, and I'm just very lucky that, I've been at it so long and still have the fire and the passion to be on set and like, lead the team and get movies made, because it's tough. It's really tough. Even with like digital technology and all that stuff, it's a well-organized circus, and it's hard to do.
Not anything I should ever try and tackle, I don't think.
And you have experience in a lot of different roles as far as filmmaking goes. I mean, for Funny Fat Guy, you were the director, and I mean, I looked through your IMDb, and there was a lot of cinematography in there. Can you explain to me like what that job entailed? Like, I kind of get what cinematography is, but I don't get what a cinematographer does for a film.
Absolutely. And it can kind of be like this vague title where if you're like the director of photography, like if you're just like, you're basically the guy that tells the grips and the gaffers to go set up the lights. And then you can be someone like me where I'm the only one on set, and like I'm actually, in there dialing in the lights, and like, I'm my own gaffer and grip sometimes. And so like as the cinematographer, it's kind of an interesting title because it can be everything from being the director of photography down to just operating the camera. And a lot of my credits, in addition to Funny Fat Guy, is like I'm just a camera operator. So like for the Rockabilly documentary that I told you about, like I was just a camera operator on that. And there was a separate director of photography, and like I learned so much from her, and that was amazing. But I like running a camera every now and again. Like every set I don't have to shoot everything that I direct, but there's certain projects where if like it's a documentary or just like a sketch or something like that, I might as well just shoot it myself, because it's one less body on set distracting, or like, one less person to feed pretty much. So I do a lot of sets where I'm the camera operator and I bring like a boom mic and I just kind of do it myself. I just kind of one-man show it. But then obviously if you're doing something bigger, I got to shoot like a pretty big budget commercial, and it was like a 3-day shoot. And I directed it, and then there was a separate cinematographer and art department and like all that stuff. And that was actually super fun, because then you got like 3 people looking through the monitor at the image, and like you got like just this nice collective brain of what you're going for. And I found that was super fun too, but I haven't had that luxury in features yet where I work in that, but I'll get there. And I just can't wait for my next one where I have, a proper video village where I watch, the stuff and I direct from there, and I can, just focus on directing. That's my next step.
And what is the directing process for this animated thing going to look like compared to what you're normally used to? I mean, do you have any experience directing like animation like that?
So with that one, I will be a co-director, and animation has a lot of co-directors if you see that. And I'll probably be more story character, and we don't have the other director hired yet, but I'll be a co-director. So we're definitely getting somebody that knows the art world. And then it's kind of fun with animation, because if you think about it, it's basically like a radio play until you add the images. So, my team and like my side of it will be doing the voice work with the actors, because the animators need the voice before they animate it. So basically you're kind of like making this like radio play. And I think that's amazing, because even in my head, I can like close my eyes and hear this radio play and like figure out where the shots are going to be and what it's going to look like. And I think it'll be super exciting, but that'll be a different process working with like a co-director and, kind of like hopefully sharing a brain on your creative ideas. But
yeah, one of the things that I remember that Dan told me about you, Daniel Crawford, he's one of my best friends, and one of the things he said about Ryan Penington is that that your creativity really shines when you are basically getting different creatives in the same space and basically facilitating an environment where people can kind of be creative and be be the best version of themselves in the context of that project. And I imagine there's a bit of leadership with that. It sounds like that you've been in quite a few different leadership roles. Can you kind of give, I don't know, like what would be some tips you would have for me for like leadership type position in that? Because that's something that I've personally struggled in a lot of my creative ventures. In my experience, it's a lot like herding cats, and it's hard to get people on the same page.
I love the herding cats. Yeah, I guess it's like, first of all, it's knowing what you want. So you have to know what you want on whatever project you're doing, and you have to do all the pre-work before the meetings. Like you can't go into like a meeting, like let's say you're in like an art department meeting or something with like the costume designer. You have to at least do some research before or know other films or other styles to tell that person something, because you can't just go in there and go, I don't know, what do you think? Because then that's when your project gets kind of muddy. You don't have to know everything about wardrobe or costumes, but you have to be like, I want it to look like Blade Runner, this or that. And then the person at least knows what you're talking about. So one thing is to know a little bit about every department. And then if you don't know anything about the department, you tell that person that, like if you don't know anything about cameras and cinematography, don't pretend like say, hey, I'm, new to cameras, so I'm going to trust you on this, but this is the look that I'm going for. And you kind of like open up a creative, this is what I'd like to accomplish, as opposed to this is what it's going to be. Like, because people that are just, if I'm like, hey, it's going to look like Blade Runner, hey, it's going to look like, I tell, like, there's no real creative process necessarily for those people. There is, I guess, but like it just comes better when it's collaborative. And that's like from like almost the bottom up crew wise, like every person on set's super important. And if you know your vision and they know your vision and you know what the goal is, it just makes being on set so much better than like, oh, I don't know, maybe I want like a close up, or maybe I want this, or like, I don't know. So you got to do all the work beforehand if you're going to be any kind of a leader. You got to know what to say. And then even in your head, you got to think, what if it doesn't go right? Or what if this, I want to get this wide shot, but we can't get it. Like you always got to have a good plan B, and then work with somebody that's good enough to like, pivot and do that plan B super quick. So I guess advice for leadership on set or leadership in any kind of creative project is like confidence and like being authentic with the people and letting them know that you don't know everything, and then always know that you're a student of whatever art form you're in, and collaboration is like filmmaking is meant to be collaborative, and those people do want to help you get your vision, and you just can't be like dictating to them. It's more, you really got to rah team it. Like basically you're a cheerleader, and like there's a funny Simpsons episode where like Homer's in charge of like Scorpio's, evil nuclear plant or whatever, and he's in charge of a team, and like they're like all at the computers doing stuff, and he's like, so how's it going? They're like, good, Mr. Simpson. And then he's like, well, could you work a little harder? And they're like, right away. And it's just like, stuff like that. It's like you just got to kind of ask and be like, well, that's great, could it be, like you always want to push people and push them to do their best. And filmmaking is like, obviously, like if you're working on like a Jon Favreau movie, you respect him as a person and as a leader. So those people work really hard, and like, they invest themselves in the movie, and you can have that at a small independent film level too. If you're working with your friends on a movie, and they're like, hey, I have to tell this story and it's this and that. And if you're authentic with them, and they'll help you. And like, that's a big word too. If like you're trying to do something on the low budget, like, could you help me figure out how to make this look like, Magnolia? I want the sequence where it's like fast and it goes this. And like, if you use that word help, it opens up just a good creative dialogue with the people you're working with.
I could see that, asking for help as opposed to, hey, do this.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, I mean,
it instills a friendlier sense of obligation.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's such a basic thing. You're right. Exactly. It's so basic, but it really is like you kind of have people, because when you're on set, like everybody's terrified. the production assistant's terrified he'll get the coffee order wrong. The cinematographer is terrified that something will go wrong with like one of the SD cards or something like that. Everybody's just kind of terrified. So if you as the leader can be like, hey, we're just making movies, like double check, make sure this is that. I'm a big fan of like, this is even for myself and everybody else. Like, it's like you can make one mistake, but like just don't keep making the same mistake. So it's like if something happens on set where like a take does, the sound didn't get recorded or something like that, you really have to let it go and be like, all right, because then as a director, like if you make a mistake or like you're like, we got to go back and shoot this, like you're given a little leeway too. So the golden rule of treat others how you want to be treated, that works on the film set.
Yeah. So just to kind of like redistill that, it sounded to me like you were saying, like some of the most critical things, like have a very clear vision, right? As someone in that directorial role, be a director, not a dictator, like very, very explicitly. And then C, understand that while you are essentially, the person in charge, you are more in a student role than a teacher role, while still kind of guiding the show.
That's distilled pretty good. Yeah.
Which is I think that's just a fascinating concept too. Like to be managing that many things, like you almost have to be like an excellent director that like not only like makes great shit, but like also people want to work with. Like, sounds like you've got to have a lot of your shit together, like really, really well. Like you can't be some raving like egomaniac. You can't be like a hyper narcissist, or maybe you can. Maybe those things lend themselves as well. But that's a lot to juggle.
Yeah.
It is. And I mean, again, you can always then just boil it down to, if you're like that type of person that can't work with other people, then you just have to be the one man, you have to run your own camera and stuff like that. And, it's easy to burn relationships and burn friendships on projects that like, just become, for lack of a better word, a shit show. Like, because you can lose like personal friendships and stuff like that. And basically it boils down to like, a lot of those problems is because they don't know what to do, or like, they don't have a plan B, because, filmmaking is a lot about the plan B, because you don't get kind of like your first choice with everything, locations, actors, whatever, what have you. Like, so you have to, surround yourself with a team that's really willing to work with you. And like I said, the Vietnam metaphor, it's like, it's your platoon and you're going out for like these little missions. And, it's like, you kind of think of each day of your production like a little mini mission. It's like, today we're taking the restaurant, we're shooting the restaurant, we're getting all that stuff. That's our mission for today. And, you hopefully have people that you work with that are thinking scenes, like, the next setup ahead of you or the next day ahead of you, and you have those people ironing that stuff out. A lot of it is the pre-work and the nitty-gritty, not fun stuff, so that like you do all that first, so that when you come to set, you get everything you want. And that's why the masters are so good, is because they take the pre-production time. I mean, granted, they have the budgets and the storyboard artists and all of that stuff, but you have to really think it out in your head. And filmmaking's so hard that if you can't even think it out in your head, or, write the script or like write the storyboards, like filmmaking's 100 times harder than drawing a picture or writing a script. So you just have to be disciplined and kind of break it down step by step. And it's possible. And it's really fun. It's really rewarding. I love filmmaking.
Damn.
How was that, kind of tailing off of that, how was that seeing Funny Fat Guy for the first time in the theater?
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Like, again, I've always been a fan of going to the theater and the collective experience of seeing a movie in the movie theater. It was awesome. It's my second feature, but it was the first time where I would sit down in the audience and feel comfortable start to finish, them watching it. And it played a bunch of film festivals and it won some awards. And like a couple of the reviews for it, like even somebody that didn't like the film, they said in his review, he was like, but the ending is worth sticking around for. And it's like the ending hits where I want it to hit. There's certain moments where I know things are coming and the audience always reacts to it. Like it's not giving away much, but the main character steps in puke and the whole audience goes, oh, and I always love like sitting next to a friend and go, here it comes. And it's really just the sound effect that does it, but it's like, and like everyone goes, oh, and I love that part. So it's awesome. So I've probably seen it at least 10 times with like an audience in a theater, and each time's fantastic. Like it's awesome. It feels really good.
Yeah, you get that immediate feedback with what you're doing as opposed to just hoping it went over okay, Kind of like playing a show, you feel the energy in the room with what you've created. So yeah, that's cool. I imagine that's got to be a good feeling.
With the added benefit of being shrouded in darkness in case it doesn't go well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially if no one knows you're there.
It's way better than being on stage.
You mentioned earlier that that one of the things that you kind of struggled with for a little bit was like communicating ideas and conveying ideas. Is there something that you've done over the years that has helped that along? Or like, how do you feel about communicating ideas on the set or with different types of creatives nowadays?
For sure. Like, basically what I've done is like, just the experience over, I've just become more confident as I've gotten older, like kind of almost each year, I just get more and more confidence, like with my ideas. And I think I always knew what I wanted. And again, it was the problem communicating it, and it would be because there wasn't like that confidence behind it. Like I'd be like, let's put the camera low or this or that, or like there just wouldn't be a confidence behind it. But if you go into it with like, the storyboards or something like that, you just by being confident, even if you don't articulate your ideas the right way, you can like, just by being confident with like saying, this is going to be a movie that's like this or that, like, even if you stumble over your words, if you're confident and know what you want, people will get it. And then if they don't, they just communicate back, that they don't get it. And you're always afraid that you're going to say the wrong thing or someone's going to find you out, that you're not like, you don't have all the answers. But if you just confidently go for it and work on instinct, and if you don't know the idea, say, I don't know the idea, but what's the fix? Like just by being authentic and not pretending that you have all the answers, you're just better able, you're just more able to communicate to your crew better. So I would just say knowledge, getting out there and kind of getting out of your own way and getting over yourself,
Nice. I dig that. Yeah.
Universally applicable, regardless of medium.
Yep. Well, I think it's about that time to start winding it down here. We've got another podcast coming up right after this one, but lately, man, we've been asking a lot of our guests like advice that they might have for creatives that are starting out. And you know what? It's something that I noticed during this podcast. I don't know at what point, but it seems like it's a pretty recurring theme that we're having guests that aren't just good at one thing. Like, it seems like a lot of different creatives are good at like several different things, and that's really cool. But what advice would you have, Ryan Penington, to any creatives that are just starting off, whatever it might be?
I mean, like if you're just starting off, so, you're getting into an art form or whatever, it's like, just know that everybody started somewhere at some point. So there's always a starting point. So don't be intimidated that you're just getting started. A lot of people sometimes people can't even get started because they put so much emphasis on that. But so basically know you're starting somewhere and give yourself permission to fail. And then also before you start, like almost like visualize exactly where you want to be. Like if it's a movie, like what type of movie, close your eyes and it's like, what type of movie do I want to make? How is the audience reacting? Like, are they laughing? Are they crying? Is it a scary movie? Is it this or that? What type of filmmaker do I want to be? It's like, the more you can crystallize and visualize what you personally want to look like, it's better for you to have an idea of how to get there, as opposed to like, not knowing what type of films you want to make or music you want to write. You'll kind of like wander around a forest forever. So it's like, if you can, when you start, know where you want to be, that helps you a lot. So like for stand-up comedy, which is just a hobby, I know where I want to be. I want to be, like I said, doing an open mic a month, and I want to, have a new set of jokes, and I want people to laugh at these jokes, and I want to, be wearing a t-shirt and these types of sneakers, and I want to come out on stage like this. And just the more I visualize and know, the easier it will be for me to get there. So I guess the best advice is, visualize yourself already having done it the whole time. Like if you're just learning guitar, pick your favorite guitarist that you want to sound like, and just always visualize that you're going to sound like that eventually. And you're just at the start, and, just keep going. Like the starting is the scariest part for any project. And then also some advice too is like knowing when to let go of something. Like like if you're holding on to something, and I'm guilty of it, it's like if you just hold on to the idea of what you're supposed to look like and the idea of how your career looks, or so it's a double-edged sword with that visualization. By like boxing yourself into the way that it's supposed to look, you're kind of like cutting off avenues and different approaches that, you might not have known existed. So with that visualization, always know that you can decide not to be that person anymore, or decide not to go that way anymore, and have the permission to give it up. Like, I don't know, like sometimes we do things like to impress other people, or like, to make our parents happy or this or that. But if you're not doing it anymore for yourself, don't be afraid to like cut it off and let it go, because then it makes space for something else, and try new stuff all the time.
Nice.
I love it.
Love it.
I love it. We talk a lot about setting intention as being like a critical component, because it's one of the very, very few things that you have any true control over in life. But I think equally as important, something that Ryan and I have spoken about, off air, but visualizing that intention. But like you said, kind of almost leaving blurry borders on everything for adaptability and malleability, or just killing the thing where it stands, So
Absolutely.
Valuable advice. Thank you, Mr. Pennington.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And all right, well, so I guess, Ryan, did you have any critical questions that you didn't get to ask before we shut it down and get some plugs?
No, I think I'm good. We're definitely going to have you on again, man.
Yeah.
This has been a lot of fun. Yeah.
I enjoyed it. Thanks a lot, guys.
Shout out to Dan Crawford for helping us make this happen.
Oh yeah.
Dan Scott Crawford.
The one and only.
The one and only.
So where can people see Funny Fat Guy? Where's that available?
So that's interesting. We're actually about ready to do a digital release. So it'll be on streaming services, most likely by the fall, if not by the fall, the end of the year. So you'll be able to see it on like your Google Plays and all of that stuff. Nice. There is a Facebook page, Funny Fat Guy. You can find it on there. It's the only movie called Funny Fat Guy, and our updates will be on there. But we're going to do a really cool premiere for it, where we get the stand-up comedians, because the film had a lot of stand-up comedians in it. We're going to do like a live Zoom movie premiere for it. So that's just now getting in the works, but it'll be released.
Sweet.
Nice.
All right.
Yeah. And where can our audience find out more about Ryan Penington and keep a thumb on your pulse there?
Feel free to follow me. Probably, I would say my Instagram is the best place to see what I'm up to. So Ryan Penington, and my last name only it's Penington, doesn't have the double N. So Ryan Penington, Instagram, all my creative stuff flows through there, whether it be comedy, updates about movies. So that would definitely be Ryan Penington Central.
Cool. Excellent. Awesome. Ryan, thanks a ton, man, for taking the time with us, man. It's been a great and super, super dense conversation. I feel like there is like people should be taking notes to this one for sure.
Well, I always joke. So the title of my book, if there was ever an autobiography about me, is "I've failed enough." All right, I'm sorry. It's like I never gave up, but here's why you should. The Ryan Penington.
Nice. All right. Well,
All right.
great job, everybody.
Great job. Thanks again. And
it's over.